Hello and welcome to the Open Era Podcast. My name is Devang. I'm joined as always by Mr. Simon Bushell. Bush, 1 week of Wimbledon in the books. Bit of a weird one. Also, who would have thought it would rain in England?
It's never happened before. Don't know if anyone's ever realized. Quite a rainy country. Actually, I was going to ask you this question. I was going to ask you in parting shots, but seeing as you asked me immediately off the bat, is there scope to have tents over all of Wimbledon to have retractable roofs? Is that actually possible?
These are the kind of ideas that get you chased out of town square, but I back it. Just some huge carnival tent, yeah. We know clearly that the folks in the village proper of Wimbledon are amicable to these wide sweeping changes that destroy their sightlines. So I think this is a good idea.
I don't think there's going to be any issues at all, right? It will never make it to
Right.
There will not be a council meeting somewhere where some 75-year-old woman is taking 90 minutes to explain the reasons why a white tent would destroy her property value.
I also had this for parting shots too, but I do want to get into this because there is such a huge inherent advantage to getting your matches in early if you're on one of the show courts of the roof, as opposed to being one of the dregs that has to play on court 99 and wait 5 days to play. I feel like the competitive imbalance is pretty huge.
I think that is very legitimate, and I think it would be really fascinating because we have roofed surfaces or roof courts at all 4 Grand Slams now, just to see whether or not there is data to back this up. Because it's been a couple of years now since all 4 have had roofs on them, so I think it would be interesting to see how that's actually shook out.
Well, we're going to talk about everything that's happened so far, including the shocks, the remaining contenders, and then, of course, parting shots, as we've alluded to a couple of times already, Simon. But as I speak to you today, all of the Canadians and Brits are out of Wimbledon. Most devastatingly, Denis Shapovalov falling in the 4th round after playing a bunch of players he should have beaten. He should have beaten this person as well, Safulin. I think he's touching the 90s in the ranking. But what do we say about the Commonwealth, Bush, after this dispiriting display?
You want Canada first, or you want Britain first on that one?
I feel like Canada might be more cut and dry, so maybe we start there. Because for all of them, and then I think Milos might be a separate conversation, for all of them not necessarily performing at the peak of their powers, especially Felix, who I think, as evidenced by that first round display, is just not feeling it at all, and might be time for some pretty monumental changes maybe. But even Bianca coming on the way back as she is, and I actually think she might have one of the most positive outlooks exiting this tournament amongst this Canadian contingent. I wouldn't even say a mixed bag. I think it's just they're all in different spots, and wow, what a difference a couple of years makes.
Yeah, no kidding. So I think in the case, Shapo's injured. I saw him being interviewed on TSN and doing his press conference afterwards, and it sounds like he's donezo for at least a couple of months. Looks like he's a doubt to play the hardcourt swing in North America.
Months. Wow.
Yeah, he seemed pretty down on it. I mean, he's just come off court and just lost, but I think the quote was him saying that he couldn't walk on court at the end of that one, so that's not a good sign.
He did call for the trainer in that match as well.
Yeah.
And he had his left knee taped up. That's devastating.
All is not great in that camp. I think from the sounds of things, at least the way that he was talking, is that this has been bothering him for quite a long time, and he's tried to do well enough at the Grand Slams to protect his top 30 ranking.
Yeah.
So I think with that in mind, I think we may be seeing not a lot of Denis Shapovalov for the next few months. I'd be surprised, honestly, if we saw him before the US Open. And secondarily, on the Felix front, I wonder as well if there's stuff in the camp we're not being told about Felix as well from an injury perspective, just how bad this year has been. He's 13-12 on the season, and he's not really looked at all like the player that we know he is. I think Doha aside, when he made the semi-final, he's just looked very, very average. If you were to tell me that Felix Auger-Aliassime was 70 in the world as opposed to the number 6 in the world, then I would have believed you based upon how he's played this season. So I have to believe that there is more to this other than just a complete loss of confidence, because he's too good of a player for some of these results to happen.
Yeah, I feel like they might have switched bodies at a certain point here in terms of Felix just being unable to sustain himself in rallies and get dug into those rallies that he found so much success in. It was extremely jarring to see him not being able to cope at all. with people who are, I think you could say, his tennis inferior. And then Dennis playing not to lose, to be honest, in those first couple of rounds, which in light of this injury news, I think that kind of colors how he played as well. But he played within himself, which does not happen much at all these days. And we've also talked about Dennis playing way too many matches as well in the past. But when you hear them literally speaking about protecting their ranking and protecting their stature, I can't help but think about someone like Leylah Fernandez, who now is so far down in the rankings that it's extremely impacting her ability to work her way back up and target what she needs to do. Because once you fall off that far, it's a very long road back.
I think Fernandez is a really interesting case study because she's playing a hell of a lot more doubles, and keep an eye out for her in mixed doubles as well, playing with Wesley Kohlhoff. I think she's got a real chance of winning this tournament and being a Grand Slam champion in doubles. I thought she played well in singles. I thought that match was one of the best matches of the week against Caroline Garcia. I thought she accounted for herself extremely well. She's a really good player. I don't think she's like a top 10 level of player, and I think perhaps what the expectations were around that US Open and her getting to the final in singles perhaps overinflated what she actually is capable of doing in singles, because she's just a really, really good player who is, I think, going to be right around the 20 to 30 range and an extremely good doubles player. And I think that's something to be really celebrated.
What if I said to you that Leylah Fernandez would maybe come close to having the career that Barbara Krejcikova ended up having? Wouldn't that be a great thing? Like, wouldn't that be something that you can kind of see as well?
I think she's a very, very good doubles player. I don't think she's that good. I don't think she...
I mean, that's probably pushing it a bit.
Yeah, I do genuinely mean it on the mixed doubles front, and watch if they get dumped out tomorrow. But I think they have a really, really good shot to win this title.
Well, I strangely end on who I think has the most positive vibes exiting this tournament. It's Bianca. And I was talking about this today. The matches played she's had since 2019 have continuously trended downward. And if she is healthy coming out of this, which fingers crossed, she'll end up playing the most matches she's played in 3 years. And I think that's a massive deal. And this last hurdle for her to get over is not that she's far away, but closing that small gap between her and the top players, because she was once there and it's easy to see why she was. Like, I think that Jabeur match was also aesthetically one of my favorite things to watch this week so far.
It was fantastic. Easily circled as one of the matches of the week. I think with everything with Andreescu, it's exactly what you said. It's consistency, because I think her in big matches, she has that competitive spirit to hold her in many, many contests. Wasn't to be in this match against Jabeur, and I think Jabeur is interesting.
Do you think the delay Seward B, or where do you fall on the third set time break?
What do you think on this one?
I think that they've both been through enough situations where it wouldn't actually matter. I think it kind of helped Ons, though. I think it helped Ons reset in a way that I think the focus she's devoted to her mental training paid off there. Not to say that Bianca slipped, but I think Ons was able to capitalize on that moment.
We will not let this title slip, as they say. I think handling some of the situations that have been thrown at these players in the first week, I think is testament to the point that you raised off the bat about the inequality, perhaps, of having outside courts and the schedule that comes with it.
Bianca started on Thursday, pretty much, right? And she ended up playing every day continuously to this point. Like, that cannot be great.
Yeah. I think I wrote in the Discord that I think there's going to be some very shocking results that people don't expect. And I think we did see a fair share of big time losses and lots of seeds falling. I also don't think that's done either, just given that they're still playing catch up on this. And of course, like, show courts have roofs and all that kind of stuff. So we're about to get back on track for the second week. But there's been a lot of tennis played in a very short space of time, Dev. It's going to, I think especially more so for the players that are ranked like 30 to 70 in the world, who are used to maybe sometimes getting a show court and sometimes not.
Yeah.
It's probably going to badly affect them going into the second week.
In the sense that their whims and wishes will be adhered to?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah. Weird stuff going on. Like, I did not assume that Rublev and Bublik would get center court on Sunday, you know? Like, things like that where I'm like, all right, this doesn't seem as purely, not offensive, but like maybe purely in the old times, like the French Open has done in terms of who they schedule people where. I feel like Wimbledon's a whole different animal of like not understanding how much you have to get in, and then also scheduling night matches that end up beginning with no chance of finishing. And that Tsitsipas Murray match, I think God knows how that would have ended if it did have to end on that same day it started, but it's worth a conversation. Do you want to get into the shocks? Because I've listed out the seeds, and I know the common refrain is to be like, oh, like obviously we expected this and we expected that. But I, Simon, have to say, I'm quite heartened that we kind of nailed this. Like we kind of understood what was happening coming into this tournament. I don't feel like we missed any of these. Sebastian Korda saying that he was an unsung favorite and then losing immediately kind of made me laugh. I kind of laughed at that. I needed that.
You like the confidence.
I love the shocking bravado that honestly was not needed at all.
So I guess the question that I have for you, and more broadly, if you're analyzing this week, is the biggest shock Coco Gauff in round one?
And is it even though? That's the other thing. Not really at this point, which I hate to say it. I would have said that Ostapenko losing that quickly was a bit of a surprise because this woman puts in more yards than anyone else. She plays everywhere. She's consistently pretty good. But maybe I shouldn't have been surprised that it ended up catching up with her on the biggest stage.
Potentially, yeah. Well, go back to last week and hear my predictions about Elena Ostapenko for my thoughts on whether or not she was going to run deep in this tournament. I don't know, just touching Gauff for a second, I actually thought it was a really good match. I think a lot of stuff can be said about the loss for Coco Gauff, and not enough has been said for the win for Sofia Kenin as well. I think Gauff's obviously had an up and down year, but just really nice to see Kenin back and see that stomp around at the back of the court. She has such a great walk.
And the bracing, the come on that back to Leighton Hewitt era in terms of you're like, oh my God, what?
It's the kind of thing that I just genuinely really wish I had that level of confidence on a tennis court. I really, really do. So I can't help but admire it. It was one of those things that if this happened in a quarterfinal or in a semifinal, then no one bats an eye that Coco loses this match. Right. It's just the fact that it's round one. I think she will win this title at some point, Gauff. I think she's just too good of a grass court player. She has too many weapons, but at the same time, those weaknesses which she's getting caught out on, the length of those strokes that she has and the speed of the grass court and how much she's getting caught moving side to side, it's starting to catch up with her. And I'm still bullish that I think she will win this title at some point, but it's like one of those things that I have with Sinner as well, where every passing tournament that doesn't happen, I feel more and more slightly like an idiot for picking someone.
Who would you say you are more confident in fulfilling their potential and winning at least a few slams? Coco Gauff or Mira Andreeva?
Jesus. What a question. I think you still have to pick Gauff, don't you?
You gotta lean Gauff, right? There's way more evidence. There's way more things to go on.
The player that's made the Grand Slam final already, who's been to world number one in doubles, who's been inside of the world's top 5 in singles. Those players usually make finals.
I asked that almost facetiously just to point out how quickly things can change and like how we'll be off one thing and on to the next without actually maybe recognizing it's not linear and like it's going to be difficult. I think Coco's clearly in that difficult patch right now, and she's 19 and she's already had how many matches under her belt already? Like it's pretty nuts.
I remember watching a video a while ago and I just could have sort of stumbled on a random YouTuber who was doing tennis analysis. Forgive me, I don't remember who it was, but it was someone who was doing coaching analysis.
Is it Sabine Lysicki fan? Because probably is. Probably is.
Probably, yeah. And they were talking about Stefanos Tsitsipas, and they were basically like, they offhandedly made the remark being like, oh yeah, I think Steph is going to win 5 or 6 majors. And I was just like, can we get one? Can we just like fucking get like one and just go from there? And I feel like there's so much potential to just crown someone so early. You know, guilty as charged on this one. We love a good hype on Open Era. But in general,
of course,
can we just get one first? For any of these players and then go from there.
Yeah, and I mean, the WTA as well. Whatever you want to say about the current men's era, I feel like by many, many margins of accounting, the WTA is more exciting to watch. There's more players that are on any given day able to win the biggest titles. Like the roster is stacked. Makes sense. It makes sense that there would be some growing pains, so to speak, for Coco Gauff. Like on the inverse, Maria Sakkari losing in the same round, I have far less hope for. And I think that's also based on some history now, or maybe some experience, or getting a good enough read to be like, all right, what's the deal here? It feels funny to be so maybe bullish on Coco and then be like, all right, Maria, I don't think so.
I think if you were to look at the bell curve of her career, not to be too unkind about it, I think we're already on the downswing of it. I think you can easily point to 2021 and think that was the height of the bell. What a strange turn of phrase. But I think that is probably true. And I think her results at Grand Slam level and even at Premier level back that up as well, which is that this is a tailing off. And this is a player that I think we've seen the best of. And would be so happy to be proved incorrect about that. But stats don't lie on this and your results don't lie.
For once, Simon, I think you're right.
Broken clocks.
I say that boldly. Men's side, anyone else stand out to you? I think I wanted to see Musetti Djokovic again. Musetti, though, kind of looks like a youngster out there against some of the more physical guys, some of the guys who quote unquote love the hard yards and put their time into developing that endurance. I felt like you could kind of tell what the gap was there.
Talk about the upward trajectory of players. I think we're still scratching the surface with someone like that. To grow into the body and to grow into the hard yards of the tour. He's still 21, and I think it's a different kind of 21. Like, I think if you look at the physical stature and the fact someone like Carlos Alcaraz, right, born to be into this position, is just a man-child. Wait a minute, that makes him sound like, I don't know, a grown man and a boy, whatever. You know what I mean? A physical specimen, if you will. Musetti's not that, right? Like, clearly, to get to 13 in the world or 14 in the world where he is currently, I think that trajectory is still going up. I don't think this is him tapping out as a third round level of player. You know, I'm on the record as saying that I still think he will win Roland Garros. I think he's too good on a clay court for him to not make the latter stages of that tournament. I am of the opinion that I think he should be terrible on grass, just given how long the backswings are and like all the things that go with it.
Generally,
the fact that he's winning matches here and being competitive is a surprise to me.
And Hubert Hurkacz knows his way around grass quite well. So I think with that in mind, that's fair to say. I will say I'm not happy to see anyone lose, but also I snickered a bit when I saw Casper Ruud out in the second round. Taylor Fritz out in the second round. Taylor Fritz also who had the unfortunate timing of playing when that rain started on Monday, basically, because his whole schedule was thrown out of whack. But Francis Tiafoe-Bush, the Dimitrov match, so hyped on American television. They had it on ABC. This was like the match everyone was tuning in for. John McEnroe saying, he'll win this. And yet, Grigor Dimitrov destroying a narrative in front of our eyes.
It wasn't even close, was it?
No, it felt bad. It felt bad all around.
And I thought the thing that was kind of shocking about it was just how poor Tiafoe was on return of serve. Just how straightforward some of those games were for Dimitrov. He barely made anything. I don't think actually Tiafoe didn't make a single breakpoint opportunity during the whole match, which, but spoilers, is not great. That is not good for the people listening at home. Strange times. Those
are the players that have lost so far in shocking and not shocking circumstances. When we come back after the break, we talk about the contenders, who remains, the favorites, the dark horses, all of that coming up next on Open Era. Welcome back to the Open Era podcast. We've talked about the shock so far at Wimbledon. Now it's on to the contenders. Let's begin with the WTA, where the quarterfinals are nearly set. As we're talking, Simon, we're talking about the people that we've seen most recently. We mentioned Bianca at length in the opening segment, but the person who defeated her, Ons Jabeur, is in what I would consider the group looking into the big three and wondering, can we put a dent in their armor? Of the contenders that are not the big three, who stood out to you the most this week?
I think her. I really do think her.
Yeah.
Just given her overall game style, she should suit this surface like a T. Like, genuinely, the fact that she made the final, her record is actually pretty good on this surface as well, on grass, for all of what the grass court season is. Yeah, I think she looks really good. I would not shock me if she gets to the final again, or at least makes another deep run here. That match against Petra Kvitova will be really, really good. I'm glad that it's on centre court, because you couldn't want a more good advertisement for the WTA than watching these two players play each other in a round of 16 at Wimbledon.
I'm going to go with Jess Pegula, though, as well, Bush. I feel like, and Kamil and Josh on the Discord, just the Discord for being incredible as always, and the best place to be during a Grand Slam especially. But I think Josh put this well when he talked about Jess Pegula. When she has a good draw, she usually capitalizes on it. She does not throw these chances away. And I think that is a testament to how ridiculously consistent she is. Perhaps not eye-catching, but also rock solid when she needs to be. And especially, even as I mentioned, how good the big three is, and how it would be pretty surprising if the champion did not come out of that group. They haven't looked invincible. And I do think like Jess Pegula is one of those people, along with Ons, that literally has a decent shot of winning this title at the end of the day.
Yeah, Jess Pegula in all three disciplines as well. She's playing mixed doubles, women's doubles, and women's singles as well. So large body of work, or large amount of work to get through for Pegula to continue a run here. She's been fine. I think other than the wobbles against Lauren Davis in the first round, she's, I think, taken care of business nicely, and I think she's done the things that she's supposed to do. I think she's going to lose tomorrow against Vondrousova from the time of recording. But having said that, Dev, I'm happy again that you've picked Jess Pegula.
She walloped Tsurenko, though. I mean, 20 more points won. Decent enough on her first serve, but yeah, I mean, that's her. I mean, as we're talking right now, and I hate to do this on a podcast, we do not want to date ourselves, but Belinda freaking Bencic is causing Iga a lot of problems, Bush. A lot of problems. And I think this goes back to that. Maybe not too early. I'm fine with calling them the big three. They are. And I don't like how there's clearly some patriarchy bullshit when it's like, we can't call them the big three because there is already a big three. No, that big three is dead. There's a new one in town. But all of them, for the most part, Rybakina and less so, looking vulnerable in parts. I like Iga had a really good opening to this tournament, but where are you at in picking a winner from either the field or in the big three? Are you still confident that it's one of those three?
Yeah, I think so. I still feel pretty confident. I mean, such a easy bet if you were given those three against the field, just given the year they've had and given, I think they are head and shoulders above the rest. That being said, grass does do strange things. I think it's reasonable to say that Sabalenka's looked the best out of all of them so far.
Yeah, I think that Gracheva match, that first set may be the worst set amongst all of them that I've seen in this tournament, at least.
Yeah.
I think maybe that Shelby Rogers Rybakina first set as well, where Rybakina was all over the place. But like that, I guess you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Rybakina has a very, very tough match against Haddad Maia as well. Someone who she does not have a good track record against. And Haddad Maia playing very well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That one's a really curious one to see what happens, because it is the kind of match that I think you could see a defending champion losing and not everyone and I think people being a little surprised by it. But I think if you do some digging under the surface on it, look at statistics and look at game matchup and everything, it's not a big surprise, I think, if Haddad Maia wins that one.
I hate to walk this back because I think I sounded quite confident last week that the winner would come from one of these three, but it's getting squirrely here. And literally watching Iga surviving against Belinda Bencic in this first set. The WTA is just too stacked. It's fantastic. I think storyline-wise, amongst the contenders remaining, Andreeva, worth mentioning again, Simon, these are her first matches on grass ever, starting in the qualifiers. She's won her first 6 matches on this surface. The Krejcikova win by retirement, but the Potapova match, I think, was a spectacular display of shot making and skill, and packing a ridiculous forehand to go alongside just incredible defense and a bit of that Bianca-esque 2019 style not being able to be hit past because there was just that incredible will to stay in a point. Like that story is pretty damn great.
Yeah, but did you see the way that she punched herself in the leg, Dev? And everyone lost their mind over it.
Was this a self-harm thing? What was going on?
She was just mad, I think.
Right.
The way that she was playing and let out some anger on her thigh. I think we've all been there. So I guess the question on Mira Andreeva is, how good really is she? Because by all accounts, and by what I see with the eye test, this looks like a Grand Slam champion very soon, Dev. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
The match wins that she's had, and the fact that even in the biggest moments that I have seen her, she does not look overawed and does not look like a player who is out of her depth, which usually spells for we're about to see some big results very, very soon. I think there's real potential here that we actually see something stupid very quickly in terms of how quick she is to win one of these big titles.
I saw Pog mentioning this on the Discord, but if we did get an Andreeva Sabalenka quarterfinal, would it be shocking if Andreeva won that match? Maybe not.
I don't think so. I don't think it's that shocking. I really don't. That being said, you could also see the flip side of it very easily, right? That she just get blasted off the court, which of course happened earlier this year as well. So let's not lose sight of that.
Fair enough. All right. Belinda Bencic did win that first set against Iga Swiatek. So holy cow. I do want to talk a bit more about Jibor Kvitova and more Kvitova, Simon, who we buried. We literally buried her in the preview episode of the show. So do we make a mea culpa here? Do we beg for forgiveness, perhaps? Where are you at here?
Let's just see what happens in the next match.
We're just hoping and praying. Bush getting a Tunisian flag hand painted under both eyes as he gets ready for that match. I mean, the match that's also on right now as we record, Victoria Azarenka, Alina Svitolina. The Svitolina-Kenin match, Simon, I was extremely, extremely impressed with where Alina Svitolina is at as a tennis player, considering the kind of year she's had and like the road back and some of the losses she had when she first returned from mat leave. Like, this is a pretty incredible display.
Well, yes. She was world number 3 for a very long time. So it's not like she doesn't know her way around the tennis court. I'm very, very curious to see what level she can consistently get back with a full year on tour, because from watching her again, and this tournament included, she still looks like a top 10 player. Nothing's really changed in that regard. I think she's actually playing a bit more aggressively. Mm-hmm. I think that's the thing that's been quite surprising to me. And maybe it's just a grass court thing, but I've been pleasantly surprised by her ability to actually dictate points. And I think it serves her well because she does have a lot of power. And I think her serve is underrated in terms of how much of a weapon it could be. I don't know, Dev. I'm excited to see her return 4 times to the tour, if she wants to, of course. I think this tournament is definitely a step too far for her, but it's still good to see her winning matches.
Shall we move on to the men, Push?
Let's do it.
Well, I will say, outside of Casper Ruud, the top 8 are still there. And a couple of those cats have beaten Novak Djokovic this year. Obviously, Novak not being at the peak of his powers in any of those earlier matches, considering he wasn't playing very much competitively. That being said, do you carry anything especially with you from this first week about, let's say, the contenders? I think there's a couple of guys here who I maybe have written off, and they still probably are worth writing off here, but who showed me something that I will just file away as a, remember that.
Like what? I'm curious to hear now, because the answer to your question is like, no.
Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. Steph is who I remain curious about. I think he would have been fine against Murray if that match continued. It looked like Murray probably pulled something, or maybe not. He was just shocked at having to pivot and slipping, and who knows how severe that injury would have been. But for some reason, I thought Stefanos would have been fine in that match. I wonder if he just feels a little less pressure these days to perform. And like the way he's performing in those situations where he's clearly not the fan favorite. Like, I'm not sure that's going to be the situation for him going forward. Maybe against Eubanks, yeah, because I think Christopher Eubanks is a wonderful story, but I feel like he's at home not being a heel, but being someone that is just meh enough that he can accept it.
Yeah, I think we've largely accepted like Steph the golden retriever, but I think really what he should lean into more is Steph the Bond villain.
Right?
That's really where I think he should land on this. Use that energy to sort of carry his career forward. Did you see the side eye in the box?
From Paula Badosa to Stefano's dad, yes. Which immediately won her the hearts and minds of a generation, because we all agree.
I think we've all been there, right? Where you've had like a significant other.
This guy.
Yeah, in front of a parent and been like, what the fuck is going on?
What is he saying? No, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Just magnified when you're in center court at Wimbledon.
How about Charlie? Charlie Alcaraz finding his feet, Bambi-esque on grass, as I've liked to joke about. But that Jari match was tricky.
It was tricky, but I thought he handled it very, very well. I think the actual bigger test is going to be the Berrettini match to see how he handles a literal like serve bot on grass and someone who is a very tricky out.
Who can come forward a bit. I think Jari coming forward was a dangerous encounter.
Yes, nosebleed territory, which you're getting to the net. I wonder about this actually, whether or not giving a target to Carlos Alcaraz is not a good thing either. Like whether or not he's so gifted in that regard and so accurate in some of his shots that he's just going to blow the doors off Berrettini. I think Charlie's looked fine. I kind of still expect him to make the final here. I really do. The match that I'm really, really curious to watch, if it's Rune versus Alcaraz in the quarterfinal, is that not a Wimbledon final at some point? Like, yeah. It has to be.
Davidovich Fokina Rune match.
He keeps winning these matches.
I know. And also like the underarm serve at 8-8, clearly a terrible idea. Listen, we all understand. Terrible, terrible idea. But Holger Rune is saving a lot of huge match points in the middle of that. I saw, this might have been Chris Otto, front of the show on Twitter, say that his mentality is, it makes up for maybe some poor decisions he also makes. He does have that, and this will be a curse, but a Novak-esque ability to dig deep enough when it looks like all chances are lost.
Yeah. Watch out, I think. If you don't like him, you're going to be seeing a lot of him inside of the next couple of years.
The other guy's down at the bottom. Novak has yet to play Hubert Hurkacz as he record, but we'll make some assumptions here. Hubert Hurkacz has also killed a legend at Wimbledon, so would we be surprised if we did it again? We all remember the bagel against Fed, but Rublev and Sinner, Bush. Jannik Sinner doing this kind of comfortably, looking pretty good, looking like he's gonna fulfill all of your hopes and dreams.
Taking care of business.
Yeah, I mean, he's beat people he's supposed to beat. But how are you feeling watching Jannik so far?
Good. Yeah, I feel really good about it. I'm excited for the inevitable Djokovic-Sinner semi-final. I think it's going to be good. That being said, not an easy 3 matches in a row if it shakes out for that for Djokovic. I expect him to win them all, but Hurkacz, Rublev, Sinner in
it's pretty good. Yeah.
4th quarterfinal and semi. It's a tough road. You're gonna have to work a little bit to get through those.
And then potentially Alcaraz, Medvedev, Tsitsipas, or Rune in the final.
God, can you imagine Danny Medvedev?
Oh my god. I mean, we need Tsitsipas Medvedev.
Oh, it has to happen, especially on a grass court,
yeah.
On center court. Please give me that.
Also, we kind of need Grigor Dimitrov winning this tournament. I think that would be also one of the greatest.
Some good stuff, isn't there? Like, despite, I think, us shitting on the ATP, and I think rightfully so, there's some decent stuff coming up over the next few days, and I think it's exciting times to be a grass court and a tennis fan going into the second week of a major, because this has been as good as it has been, I would say. As if you want a 4th round and a quarterfinal, this is about as good as you're going to get on the ATP.
Nothing you've seen from Novak has changed your mind so far.
Oh, no.
The Stan match felt sad at times. I felt like Stan had other places to be in the first couple sets.
I was trying to think of what this looked like. It kind of looked like a really old guitarist to come out and support like a new band.
Right.
And he just like can't keep up anymore.
We're paving the way forward. We're in solidarity. Yeah. No, it was painful.
It was really painful. No, Novak looks supreme here. I think this is still very much his tournament to lose. But like as mentioned, those 3 matches in a row, not a cakewalk, but I do expect him to win them all.
Let's see what happens. Any closing thoughts, Simon, on perhaps where we stand in terms of the favorites? I mean, once again, I feel like Iga's still got a very decent shot at this as we talk about her falling down a set. But I do feel like the curveballs that are thrown into a Wimbledon, including the rain, including the surface changing pretty rapidly, including the surface not playing the same when the roof is closed. There are all these variables involved that do lend to, I think, people with a bit more experience doing well, like your Victoria Azarenkas.
Yeah, the age-old question of whether or not you back the inexperience of youth or the naivety of the youth going into, I'll just play whatever conditions come up. Just play the exact same way. Yeah. Or whether it's like overthinking it. No, I know this surface, and when this happens, I have to do this. I don't know. I think there probably is. I think there's probably a bit more on the side of been there and done that, especially with a tournament like this, which does have a bunch of wrinkles and variables, which makes it slightly more challenging to win. I don't think anything has changed, which I know is not a particularly exciting point to make, but I still kind of expect the winners of this tournament to be Elena Rybakina and Novak Djokovic.
You guys looking okay now, so let's see how this goes. Let's move on to parting shots as we do this pseudo live commentary. When we come back, Federer, Murray, Venus, Kasatkina, Milos, all of that coming up next.
Welcome back to the Open Era podcast. It is time for parting shots. Devang, it is not another game for Milos. It is done, potentially. Well, he's certainly out of Wimbledon. And given the funeral-esque atmosphere that was in his interview with TSN. Did you see this interview, by the way? It felt like the Queen had died.
I went back and found it. Outside of the tone of the interview, I think there's so many positives Milos should take away from this. And if he is feeling well enough to take a swing at this North American tour coming up, we'd be all better for it. And I do envision Cinderella moment in Toronto at the Canadian Open. But yeah, that interview was dark. It was dark.
One question that I was very curious on is, but they didn't ask him in this TSN, why not the bandana? Like, he had his best results. Bandana Milos was beloved, and it didn't make an appearance here.
Sleeve, bandana, a lot of questions to be asked. I mean, even that Tommy Paul match, though, like, Milos was right there. It's pretty remarkable to me, like, seeing someone having to step away for that long and then returning and not being blown off the court. Like, just the ability to have it, quote unquote, is pretty damn special as an athlete. Like, I don't know what that feels like, but it's pretty crazy to watch.
I also think one of the interesting things of watching that match back is just the difference in body type.
Yeah.
Just from the perspective of what tennis brings and how two people can look so different in terms of physique and in terms of like physical stature and still do amazing things at the top of the tour. Like, it's not all cookie cutter that you have to be 6'1" and flexible and everything. Like, Milos, a big chunky boy, and Tommy Paul's very slender, right? Tall and slender.
I don't think you could tastefully call Milos a big chunky boy without some sort of disclaimer beforehand, sir.
We have to put the explicit warning.
As someone who's defending Richmond Hill, Ontario's finest, someone who I've literally seen at All-Star Wings picking up a to-go order, and that made my day. How dare you?
I mean it as a term of endearment.
I know you do, but still, the tone you took. I am curious to know what this goes across all jobs and all of our lives, but like motivation, or like what's keeping you going? Like, what's the driving motive for you? And I feel like for Milos to get a taste of this and realize he's not that far. I don't think he's going to win Wimbledon again, but he's not that far from returning to where he once was and where he had so many positive memories. So I can understand wanting to grind forward. And it kind of leads me into Andy Murray as well, Bush.
Yeah, well, I think Murray had himself a week, did he not? And had himself a couple of nights on centre court. And I think, talking about Milos and talking about like the motivation to keep going, I think the comeback is easier in some ways because you have a target.
Yeah, than sticking around.
Totally, right?
Well, I mean, Andy Murray's playing challenger events, like that's Part of me is like, is he playing them because he needs to win on a different level, not to boost his ranking and return to a spot where it gives him a better chance to win the big titles, but is it about literally just feeling good about being on the court and notching some successes? Because if you look at the quote unquote big tournament since he's come back, it kind of ends the same way every time.
Yeah, but that's not a bad thing, though, is it?
It's not. Considering
the dude's playing with a metal hip, and considering...
This time, though, it sounded different in the post-match, where it sounded like it wasn't enough, because like it was about achieving these successes at these quote-unquote big tournaments. I said big tournaments 40 times in the last 2 minutes, but I think that's getting to him.
I think it is as well, especially because he's been world number one and he's a multiple-time major winner, won a billion Masters tournaments. When you've been to that level and you keep probably telling yourself, right?
Yeah.
I can just keep going and keep grinding and just get easier draws. And there's always that next thing that you're chasing in tennis where it's like, oh, okay, inside of the world's top 100. Now it's 75. Then it's getting automatic qualification for majors. And then it's, can I get seeded at a major tournament? And it's okay, can I get into world's top 20, top 10 and second week of majors? Like there's all the things that you check off. And eventually you do hit a point, don't you, where you're like, oh, those things, the next on the checklist isn't happening and it's not happened. So is it just not going to happen? And I think there's two ways you can go on it, right? You can just continue to grind and have that as a goal, or you can just be like, okay, it's not happening. I'm just going to enjoy my life and enjoy the level that I'm at. And I get the sense that he probably doesn't fall into that camp.
Yeah, maybe not now, maybe a few weeks ago, but to get so close and be that close to the fifth seeded player and someone who by all accounts should not be having these many problems with you at this point, I can imagine how it would almost dangle that carrot once more and lead him to ask, okay, what else can I do maybe out of this US Open? But you mentioned all the Canadians are out, all the Brits are out, Bush, but like, I feel like the Andy Murray machine is still going strong in terms of like how things are scheduled and the media consumption and Wimbledon relying on him to make these runs. It's a bit fascinating in that regard.
He's still definitely a drawer, isn't he? He's still definitely the highlight of the coverage and the highlight of a lot of press coverage in terms of how he's presented. I don't think he's done, certainly. I do get the sense from the comments that he made, and we touched upon it. And I didn't say this to be mean, but like I think there was a bit of naivety in some of his quotes saying that he's one of the best grass court players in the world. And I think that's probably weighing on him somewhat here as well. I don't know whether he's just using it as motivation or whether he truly believes it or not. But if he did truly believe that, then in his mind, he should be winning those matches and he should be beating Steph. Although with the greatest respect, Stefanos Tsitsipas is not Carlos Alcaraz or Novak Djokovic or... really only those two in the ATP. So I think outside of that, you got a good chance against anyone.
I think it's fair. Roger Federer, Simon.
Federer's back. Also, Federer a week ago was at a Coldplay show. So
that was merging my favorite worlds into two things. Not to say I'm a lapsed Coldplay fan, but he's got massive dad energy now, Bush. This will not be able to be contained.
I saw someone under the age of 20 wearing a pair of On running shoes the other day.
I've seen a bunch of it, Simon. There's producers at my work wearing On running shoes who are in their early 20s. And I asked them what's going on. They're like, they're just so comfortable. It's happening, man.
Just imagine that in the hallowed halls of Sportsnet, you pulling someone aside, arm across the chest.
Hey, you all right, man? Everything okay? Everything okay?
You want to talk about it?
It's like... No, these shoes are just really comfortable. I fell back into the wall and had to collect my breath.
So good. You don't have to do this, man. You don't have to. No one's forcing you to do this.
So Fed showed up. I think they were honoring him which is this sum you back, but the 20th anniversary of his first Wimbledon triumph. Time flies.
It's been 20 years? Jesus Christ.
That was devastating, but I did enjoy some of the comments from the players. Elena Rybakina saying, Federer's presence made her feel nervous, which was great. Carlos Alcaraz, a bit jealous that Fed wasn't there for him. And then Andy Murray doing what he usually does and making a good joke involving the Princess of Wales, who Fed was sitting beside. Also saying that the last time Andy was on this court and Fed was watching was the 2012 Olympics when Fed was cheering for Stan against Andy, which I thought was great. A great anecdote. But yeah, I did laugh that most of the headlines from that day Wimbledon involved Federer and nothing that happened on the court. And it did remind me of just this constant state of flux that the marketing machine around tennis is at in terms of like moving on and getting better at telling other stories and also relying on these legends just being there.
It is a reminder periodically of just how the machine around Federer, his marketing and PR, of just how...
I would say for a non-American star, has anyone done it more methodically and like successfully?
In tennis, that's a good question. If anyone gets anywhere close. I don't think so, right?
I think it's been very few misses from that camp in terms of making the wrong call for the most part, right? Like I really cannot recall any of these things. And he's broken out of the tennis box and he's still looked at, I think, with such warm regard that I think he's on a short list.
I think he has a couple of things going for him, right? He has obviously a very aesthetically pleasing tennis game, and being a dominant sports star helped during that era, and him coming up during and being successful in the rise of social media really helped as well, because I think he was one of those first big stars who was clipped and, oh my God, did you see this shot level of thing that Federer was right at the forefront of? I think the other part of it is just his personality as well, which is that he is just he's a funny dude. Like, he's a funny, nice dude. I don't mean like nice as in like nice guy. He seems like a genuinely okay dude, right? In terms of wanting to spend time with and all that kind of stuff. There's plenty of things that we can say about Roger Federer, the brand, in terms of what he should be doing and how he's presented to the world. But I think just on a personal level, he seems pretty affable and someone that you could enjoy spending time with. And I think that will take you far from a PR perspective at the top of it.
I guess I'm a little surprised, and this is coming again from an obviously biased point of view, where I'm a big Federer fan, but I'm just surprised how he did make a difference outside of tennis, in the sense that people want to put their brand beside his face. And I guess I wasn't expecting that to be as strong as it's been, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we keep seeing his face everywhere, for better or for worse, because he's a billionaire as well.
That's true. Well. The answer is Sharapova, by the way.
Oh, yeah. But also... Also, yeah.
Polikova, I guess you could also say. You're going to go to that road.
Yeah.
Okay, so Just Stop Oil showed up at Wimbledon. It was wonderful to see. The jigsaw puzzles were out in full effect, Devang. Mm-hmm. Just Stop Oil also showed up at Lord's the week before.
Not cricket. Not a beautiful game.
Seeing one of the protesters being manhandled by the England wicketkeeper was also interesting. In terms
who is having a howler of a series, correct?
Oh, he's terrible.
Having a terrible... Is that Barstow?
Johnny Bairstow, yes.
Barstow. He's Barstow to me now.
It's Barstool level of good. Yeah.
Yes. Nailed it.
We kind of knew this was going to happen. Did I say on the podcast that we anticipated them showing up? And they certainly did show up. Look out as well, Dev. We might get something in the finals. I really do. I think in either the women's or men's final, they might have something planned here.
I saw the head of the British Grand Prix being like, because I believe Silverstone happened this weekend as well. And he was like, if they tried anything, it's just recklessly dangerous and stupid to try this on a racetrack.
Yeah.
I once again say, so the whole point of doing these things is to make people think about why these people are taking these risks.
It's just such a funny country to be doing this stuff in, right? Just the stick up the ass of the British public in general and the British media. Less so the British public, I would say. I don't think that's fair. I think
they're getting wise.
I think they are. And I also think that you do need to have a disconnection sometimes between the broader British public and the image that the world has of it. Because, this is going to sound like me coming all across defensive of it. But I do genuinely think there is certainly a very loud populace of the country who are just like knobheads. Like in the sense of elitist, aristocratic, control the media, present this image of the world, and like Karen levels of Daily Mail wagging. But I think there is also a large majority, I would say an overwhelming majority of the country who are very, sympathetic to the cause, understand all of these things need to get changed. And I think that is one that doesn't get called attention to enough. I don't know, like maybe it's the circles that I grew up in or worked in, but like certainly from a class perspective, Britain has significantly more class consciousness than Canada does. Significantly more.
Oh, by a mile, right? by a large mile? By a kilometer, sorry? By a large kilometer.
By a large kilometer, yes. Very good. It's the way to show that you're either European or Canadian.
Kasatkina.
Yeah, let's talk about Daria Kasatkina.
For sure.
Talking about a player who should be marketed. Actually, let's not go down the marketing route. Let's just talk about her for being an actual nice person and a good human being with good things to say and has a very level head when it comes to a lot of things. I think two interviews, or not necessarily, first interview was in the Times this week where I think she was talking about her own sexuality and coming out and how that affects her with going back to Russia and the sort of mental stress that was put on her with regards to the decision to publicly come out. And I think part of that is still shocking to a lot of people of how challenging that would have been. I'm glad that this article was written and she spoke the way that she did. But I think if you talk to anyone who is within the LGBTQ plus community of how still challenging it is, even in Canada or the United Kingdom or any of these sort of like liberal social democracies, and then think about the complete flip and the inverse of it. Fuck, we're like 2 days removed from what that Georgia protest, right? Where they destroyed the Pride Parade and you had a bunch of radicalized Nazis showing up. So it's a great interview. She's a fantastic quote and just a really good person in that regard. And it's harrowing to see like the mental effect that this took on her. And it's a reminder that this shit is hard and you should not be persecuted and you should not have to feel this way just based upon your own, sexual preferences.
Yeah, 100%. The quotes that Dasha had regarding the Saudi gambit and calling it out as it is, like the ATP players seem pretty down with this, and it's easy to see why, because they have less concerns. Literally, that was verbatim what she said, and she was bang on. And it feels like we're losing some voices of reason as this debate goes forward, and it's that slow roll that starts with Billie Jean King saying we need to open a dialogue, and Andy Murray saying, oh, it'll be tough to stay away if these are sanctioned events. That's how it begins, and it'll become a snowball, and then we'll have a tournament or 2 or 3 or 4 there in no time.
Yeah, I think there is a separation between like outright bribing. I think call it what it is, right? If you're asked to go and play an invitation to any state, like regardless. I mean, let's focus on Saudi here, right? Like, given the track record and all this sort of things, you are being bribed in effect to go and sports wash. And I think that is, we separate that of playing invitations to institutionalizing it within the sport and in the structures of like this becoming sanctioned events. And it's the legitimacy that is claimed, that is desired, I think, that is paramount. The same with all of these different states. It's no, like we're part of the club. That means that like we are legitimized to the point where like sports is being used as a backbone to accept us in mainstream and accept our actions within a wider mainstream voice, which I think we don't have enough time to dive into more of it, of all the different nation states that have used that throughout history. But I think calling it what it is and at least having one player express that, I think is a positive step.
Totally well said, Bush. And I think this conversation will only increase as we get closer to some decisions being made. I know the WTA has kind of put their flag in the ground in terms of what they're going to do, and I wouldn't be surprised if the ATP follows in similar suit very soon. Some of the questions, Bush, at these press conferences reminded me about Naomi Osaka not long ago and that ordeal. Some of these questions, man, what the hell?
Yeah, what's going on? Why do you think it's so terrible this year?
I don't know. I frankly, I've only been around a few tournaments, mostly in Canada, and I don't have a better gauge of what it's like at the events themselves from a press perspective, even though I've attended them as a fan. But I would imagine that a lot of maybe the non-tennis media people there are not watching any of the tennis really, or are there to file certain stories or get specific quotes, or in this case, someone is there to do a puff piece maybe on Tsitsipas Badosa, and they don't even understand what has happened to Paula Badosa as they ask her about a match to indicate falsely what the score was to her as the first question, right? Like, I'm assuming it's just people who are not at all understanding what the deal is.
I mean, it's a pretty big mistake, is it not, to get the incorrect winner when you're supposed to be interviewing
it's
them?
The first thing. It's literally the first thing. But overall, I mean, it's a debate we've had many times on this show. I think there's a lot of tennis players who, in their media sessions, give us some great info or some great insight and really dig deep or dive deep into what they were thinking or what their mindset is. And it's totally awesome and worth everything to hear them. On the other hand, there's a lot of press conferences that are completely useless and not like that, and a pain for everyone involved. It's just there to be done, and something that I think Naomi Osaka was alluding to a bit as well. I wonder who's this on more. Simon, is this on the PR professionals involved with these tours? Is this on the players themselves? Is this on the journalists themselves? I kind of would lean on the journalists themselves, probably.
Yeah. You're going to probably throw capitalism in there as well if you want to.
Yeah, the almighty dollar.
I just think sometimes, like, what the hell is the point of this? That's when literally everyone is just going through the motions. Sports stars have become so practiced and so atomized about doing this stuff that, I mean, NBA players are the worst for this, right? I mean, hockey players, Jesus Christ, like, talk about players who just say nothing, who have been coached to the point where it's like, yeah, literally don't say anything inflammatory at all and say the only 10 things.
And this is why I don't think tennis is like that for the most part. Like, I think there's a lot of characters, a lot of interesting people, and it's on the people asking the questions to just get it baseline correct. We'll go from there. I don't think the majority of tennis journalists are in there in bad faith and trying to be the news themselves, but it does feel like this sport lends itself to that realm too often than not.
Yeah, I mean, ask better questions is one avenue here, but also it takes two to tango on that. You can ask a great question and not have someone who's that enthralled about answering it, especially after you've just lost a big match. Like, it just comes with the territory, right? The same way that I don't think there's much point in doing the post-match things on court.
Yeah.
Like, I know it's for the crowd and everything, but I've never really been a huge fan of it. So maybe this is boomer me saying that, you know, we're just there for the tennis. We're not there for anything else. But I think there is some legitimacy to that, even if it is perhaps a slightly boomerish take.
I think it's fair. All right. End on Ash Barty.
Yeah, just we touched on the David Fokina thing, right? Did you just see the quote that he said when he was on why he did the underarm serve?
Quote, "I have to accept what happened. I shit myself, and I did not want to play that point."
Been there many times.
Been there, man. That's what we need from these post-match pressers. I shit myself. Emblazoned as the pull-away quote. Fantastic. Ash Barty, Simon, a mom, baby boy Hayden.
Yep.
I will say now, I will say she's definitely coming back. I'm now more confident she's coming back. 2024 Ash Barty season.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Sounds good. Thoughts on the name Hayden? Is that a...
Hayden? That's very, very Australian, right?
The name Hayden is both a boy's name and a girl's name of English origin meaning fire. Hayden, a formerly obscure name that has risen to huge popularity, has dipped in this year's ratings. Though Hayden is among the most distinctive of the bunch, it gets lost in the crowd of Jadens, Bradens, Aidens, and endless variations. Who the fuck is Aiden? I've never met an Aiden in my life. Or Braden. Isn't Braden just used as a slur towards Joe Biden?
Wow. It's Brandon. First.
Brandon,
I've known a few Bradens and Aidens.
Braden?
The guy Aiden Hill, was the goalie for the Vegas Knights who won that Stanley Cup.
Ah, yes. That's right.
That you so desperately see.
And the reason they won that Stanley Cup was because of Aiden Hill. Because of the name Aiden. Sorry to any people who are named Braden and Aiden.
Massive apologies to our Braden and Aiden.
Oh yeah, Hayden Christensen, of course.
Yep.
No, my son is also named Hayden. Yeah, let's go to 2 challenges remaining.
2 challenges remaining. What do you got?
Well, I came in with a scorching hot, like philosophical one from last week, and wanted to do a full role reversal into the most corporate plug of all time. I purchased a pair of noise cancelling headphones, like with the ANC in them.
What? It's 2023, Doc. What took you so long?
Yeah, I know, but $300 for a pair of headphones.
No, that's fair.
You gotta take your time on these decisions. I just really liked it. I think that's one of the things, right? It's just when you spend so long in a city that has terrible infrastructure and terrible planning, is that you get so used to the noise, you forget how quiet the world actually is without like motor vehicle traffic or rolling noise or any of that sort of stuff, or roadworks or leaf blowers and lawnmowers and everything that just makes cities loud based upon, just bad infrastructure and bad planning and bad regulation as well. And just to sit there with a pair of noise cancelling headphones on and just lying on my bed being like, wow, it's kind of nice for it to be quiet periodically.
Yeah, that is nice. Weirdly, mine was headphones too related. But
you see,
going to the dentist and being able to listen to your own headphones or whatever you want to listen to, I feel like this is a new thing that they began allowing. It's a game changer.
Wait, is that right?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, like I want they don't want it so that you cannot hear them other instructions, but it's worth it.
Interesting. I enjoy my conversations with my dental hygienist. I think she's nice. I've had the same one for like 5 years now, so
that's a relationship. Yeah,
it's the only level of community that exists in a fucking neoliberal city. So this is the funny thing about living in Vancouver. The only people that I'm on first name terms with are my regular sushi joint and my fucking dental hygienist.
The world is a vampire. Okay, we'll leave it there. A reminder, we are on patreon.com/open era. Join us there. Get the show ad free. Get the show early on Sundays. Plus, join us on the Discord, which is really the only place for talking tennis these days because Twitter is unworkable and dead. So I'm just giving up trying to use Twitter for Open Era. So find us on Discord. It's a good deal. Great community. Think it's my favorite place to talk tennis by a mile. So be smart. Join us there. Also, if you could be so kind, give us a rating or a review if you enjoyed this podcast. 5 stars. We love to read what you folks write to us as well. We're available via email, podcast@openera.ca. Hit us up there. I think that's it for producer Kevin on the 1s and 2s, and for Simon. Thank you so much for listening to Open Era. We'll talk to you next week.